This is the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast. I'm Dalton Gray.
And I'm Ryan Humphreys.
Broadcasting from our hometown of Fairbanks, Alaska. This show is brought to you by Stealthy Hunter. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dalton Gray.
And I'm Mo.
The other host of the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast. This is brought to you from our studio here in Fairbanks, Alaska. This is a brand new show, obviously episode 1. This is the beginning of what we look forward to as being a fun show to produce for you guys and fun for us to make. I guess before we get into anything else, people should know, I suppose, who their hosts are.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Mo.
Well, I'm a young man in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Young man in your 50s?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good night. We met when we were really young.
Yeah.
But we really got to know each other when we were about 15, 16.
Yeah.
Started hanging out, and I grew up in the state, born and raised, and in Alaska here, in interior Alaska. And killed my first bear when I was 12?
Yeah.
Something like that. And had a blast, and it's been awesome ever since. Grew up trapping, hunting, fishing. But, every Alaskan does, right?
Yeah. Well, some people do not. Some people get moved to the tropics when they're 2.
Oh, that's true.
And that's me.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Fairbanks, and my folks became missionaries in the South Pacific through my childhood years, and we moved back to the States permanently, back to Fairbanks, which has always been kind of home base, when I was 15, 16 years old. And my dream was always to come back to Alaska and hunt like a fool, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much been the case since then. And starting out hunting with you as a teenager, and you and I kicked off our friendship as teenagers, and then now we have become family related through my marrying one of your sisters.
Yeah.
So now we're stuck together being hunting buddies.
We are.
And it's worked out.
You can't say no to a family member, right?
So this podcast, the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, at a first glance, we don't want anybody to be confused by the name. It is simple, but we're not implying that our podcast is inherently great, although we will have our biases.
No, but our state is great.
But our state is great,
Yeah.
and the Great Alaska implies a superiority of what we believe to be our state being the greatest state in the United States of America. Because it is the last frontier, which is Alaska's state motto.
Right.
We think that we have access to the premier levels of hunting and fishing and backcountry adventures compared to anywhere else in the country right now. And this being a relatively remote state compared to the rest of the lower 48, we have access to do a lot of things. And as residents of Alaska, we have a lot of privileges to hunt moose, caribou, Dall sheep, brown bear, grizzly bear, black bear, now even muskox, mountain goat, blacktail deer, wolves, yeah, all kinds of things that people in the lower 48 probably don't have much of a chance to do, and that a lot of people spend a lifetime of savings to come up here and do one time. And because of that, there are a lot of questions that come along with wanting to hunt Alaska. And I have been involved in the guiding industry for the last 5 years or so. And that was always part of my dream, was to become a hunting guide. And the doors opened for me to enter that space a number of years ago, and I have learned a lot, and I'm continuing to learn. I'm just getting started on the grand scheme of things. And this fall, just here a couple of months ago, this episode comes out end of October time frame. And this fall, I finally convinced you to come to a guide camp with me. And now I think I have my hooks in you for that. It's a lot of fun.
I was hooked. It kind of surprised me because I went as I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. It's an opportunity that a lot of people don't have, even Alaskans in the state.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm going to do it. I went and I was going to go, pack for a sheep hunt. Right.
Yeah.
And I did it, and I had an absolute blast. And coming back, I told the outfitter we were working for, I'm like, hey, I want to come back if you'll have me back.
Yeah.
Like and I went not even thinking that I would ever say that. Like,
right.
I'll see what it's like, and
Just a lot of preconceived notions.
a lot of preconceived notions, but it was more of when I went in with trying to have no preconceptions of what it would be.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And also
That's good.
not making any plans
Right.
for what I would do as a result
Right.
of it. Like, I'm just going to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Just make an honest assessment
Yeah.
out of it. Yeah.
Make a little bit of money as a Packer.
Yeah.
Packers don't make a lot of money,
Yeah.
but get paid a little bit of something, hopefully do a good job and maybe get a tip and move on. Right.
Yeah.
But I came out of it.
Yeah. You make a lot of friends, you meet a lot of neat people, and that's probably 70-80% of the fun of guiding anyway, is getting to meet all the clients and getting to meet all the other guides, and especially the old timer guides that have been doing it for, some of them in that camp, 40 plus years.
Or pilots that have been flying all over the state.
Yeah. Yeah. 40 plus years of professional guiding or flying, and the record of those guys and their stories from what we now call the old days,
right?
Which was really the heyday of outfitting back in those times, and the limitations that we look at as just a normal part of life was non-existent back then. And so you get to hear a lot of the Wild West guide stories, and that's a great side benefit of being in the guiding world. But anyway, so I guess that was kind of a side tangent to say that there aren't a lot of podcasts in Alaska, number one, that focus on hunting. There aren't a lot of podcasts in general based out of Alaska. And so we, over a long period of time, have wanted to do our own podcast. And so now we're here. And this show is, as you can see in the show description, if you scroll down on whatever platform you're listening on, our little description talks about this is storytelling. The oldest hunting tradition known to man is just sitting around a campfire, or in this case, a couple of laptop computers and a desk and a couple of cans of energy drinks, and telling hunting stories. And we do a lot. We don't do as much as some, but we do a lot more than others. And we certainly have a lot of access to things that people that don't live in Alaska want to hear about. They want to hear what gear is being used. They want to hear about the details of a hunt story and how did you kill that moose, and tactics and things like that. And for some people, it's a preparation. And you're looking for information on what you need to prepare for when you're coming to Alaska. And so that's what we're going to kind of try to focus on. This show is going to come out every other week, the main show. That's because we're gone a lot.
We're gone a lot. We work a lot.
We both have 9 to 5 day jobs. And during hunting season, during the springtime, we are chronic, absolutely obsessed bear baiters.
Yeah.
Have been. That was our first outing together as teenagers, was bear baiting.
No, and we did predator calling first, and then we did bear baiting.
Did we really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that. But anyway, our first kills.
Right. That's what yeah.
Our first kills were over a bear bait. And that has continued. That's something that I learned in the field from your dad. He was my mentor, and yours as well, obviously from a much younger age with bear baiting. And that's a very effective way to kill bears in the interior. And we'll talk a lot more about that in other episodes. But with bear baiting being hot and heavy in the spring, our season goes from middle of April until the end of June in most of the state where we are hunting. And so we don't have time to put out a podcast that we feel is up to snuff on quality that we want to produce every week. Our goal is to not ever produce an episode where we're not excited to talk about the topic.
Yeah.
If we don't feel excited about it, then we're not going to talk about it. And we hope that you as the listener can appreciate that. And sometimes you might have to understand if we don't put out an episode because of those reasons. We want to keep the show up to a certain bar of excellence. And we don't just want to put out a show just to put out a show. And so in saying that, doing this episode of the main show every other week will allow us more time to go out there and actually have an experience and then come back and talk about it and tell the hunting story.
Right.
However, in the wintertime, when we are a little bit less busy and we have more production time on our hands, we are going to try to put out another filler episode in between the main episodes of the show. And so think of it as a subsidiary. It'll still be on the same channel. It'll still be numbered in the same order with the main show, but they'll be shorter form and more focused on, say, a gear item. If we want to review a certain rifle or a certain rifle scope or a spotting scope or this set of rain gear, anything in our gear repertoire that we have used and we want to talk about the results of and just talk about it for, it could be as little as 15 minutes and it could be as much as an hour, depending on who we have to talk about it, if we want to bring someone in that specializes in that particular subject matter.
Right. So this main show will be, hour to 2 hours?
Somewhere in there for the most part, yeah.
Give or take, depending on the subject matter and time and everything that comes into it.
Yeah.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can tell there's a video element to this new show from episode 1. The intermediate episodes, when those come out, will be a little bit more highly produced.
Yeah.
A little bit more planned. There will be more than just, the main video show here is just us talking, right? For now.
Right.
And we don't have multiple scenes or multiple cuts or anything like that. That's a lot of work. And, we don't have time for that right now.
We're just starting out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Getting started with some video to start. But we will, when we're talking about gear and stuff, we'll have more shots and a little bit better edited video, a little more production on it.
Yeah.
And those will be shorter episodes, like you said, 20 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of podcasts out there doing this type of thing now where they've got their main show and then they've got side shows.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of value in that.
I think there is too.
And that way you're not trying to cram all of your subject matter into one compacted format every week. Another detail about our show that we're going to uphold is this is always going to be a family-friendly show. We want this to be a podcast that you can listen to in your commute to work in the morning if you're dropping your kids off at school. We want you to be able to listen to this show around whoever and not worry about the content being offensive. So we are going to uphold a family-friendly, clean rating on this show. I suppose we should just get right into the main thing.
Let's get into the main thing.
And the main thing is hunting.
That's right.
It's a hunting podcast. And so we mentioned that this being the end of October, we've had, obviously, a whole year of hunting has come and gone for the most part, although we do have a sick of black-tailed deer hunt coming up.
We do.
In the Thanksgiving,
basically.
Yeah, Thanksgiving time frame.
You'll hear about it afterward.
Yeah. And we're probably going to record or make an attempt to record in the field for that.
This is a mobile setup we've got going here.
Yeah.
So you should see a lot of shows that come straight from the field.
Yes.
Maybe not quite out of the boat fishing, but we'll see.
Possibly. It is a possibility. It depends on how hard it's raining.
It depends on how much risk we want to put into all the complicated electronics.
Yep. And so this being a mobile show, we will be able to travel to different places, and we already have some plans in place to do some things like that. But with our fall season pretty much being wrapped up for the most part here in the interior for moose, caribou, bears, sheep, things like that, we already mentioned that we went up and did a guiding expedition starting in the beginning of August. And so in this episode, we're just going to talk about August, and we're going to kind of recap that, kind of give details of what went on there. I guess just to start out, I had a sheep hunter lined up through an outfit that I work for, and Mariah was signed on as a packer for that. And that was your first time sheep hunting.
It was.
Backpack hunting. And
for a long, like an expedition style backpack hunt.
Right. Living out of your backpack, sleeping in a one-man tent, and going that route was all pretty new ground to you. Although you had done a lot of very similar things, but just not for that long of a period of time. And so that was your foray into that. And we had a client that was in possession of a sheep tag, a caribou tag, and I'm not sure if, I don't think he had a bear tag. He might have.
I thought he did.
Might have, yeah. I think you're right. So anyway, in that part of the state, caribou, sheep, grizzly bear were all open for season, but the focus was on adult sheep. Obviously, we're looking for a big ram.
Right.
And we ended up doing that hunt. Just to summarize, the hunt lasted, for me, about 3 weeks or so, if not a touch longer. And originally, I was supposed to take that hunter on the sheep hunt, and then he was going to leave, and then I was going to have a few caribou grizzly combo hunters after that. Well, I guess spoiler alert, when we didn't kill a ram in the first part of the hunt, the outfitter offered a chance for him to stay and extend his hunt. At which point, I made the decision that I was going to stay with the same client and try to follow through and get him his ram. And in summary, we saw a lot of sheep.
We did.
We saw a lot of squeaker sheep that, that there were a few of them that...
Give them a few years.
Well, squeaker sheep in being that...
another year.
Some people possibly would have pulled the trigger, and we found out later
that at least one of them did.
One of them did. But we passed on them because we didn't think that it was the caliber of ram that we were looking at, and it was definitely not.
No.
I can show you a picture later on off record of that ram. But not to say that wasn't a mature sheep, it just wasn't the caliber of ram that client had come to kill. And he knew from the start, he had come with the idea of, if I don't find a good representative of the species up to this bar of excellence again, then I'm just as content not to shoot one. We don't just want to shoot a ram. In this day and age, with the sheep numbers as they are, they're pretty low, pretty much statewide in Alaska right now. The Dall sheep numbers, and it's no secret, there are a lot of people talking about that, and Fish and Game is, I'm sure, has all kinds of problems in the works that they're trying to solve from different people that are complaining or that want more sheep hunting or that want no sheep hunting. And so that it's a difficult climate for sheep hunting right now. And not to say that it's going to continue on forever. I think it will come to an end. I think there are a lot of other things that we could talk about in regards to sheep hunting. But nonetheless, the client ended up not shooting a ram. He did kill a really nice bull caribou. Not that it's a consolation prize, but it sure does make it easier on everybody when a client gets to at least shoot one of his animals on his list.
Got a critter down, yeah.
He did shoot a really nice bull caribou, and by the time I had left, it was still the widest and I think the tallest bull in the group.
Yeah.
Maybe his buddies was taller.
His buddies was taller, but it wasn't as wide.
It certainly wasn't as wide, and it didn't have the full C frame.
Right, no.
So anyway, he got a great bull caribou. He made a great shot. We'll talk more about that. So now that we've done that and kind of given the summary, we'll take a quick break and we'll jump right back in to the hunt story. And we're back. So let's just dive into the sheep hunt. Your first time in a guide camp. Talk about a little bit of the background leading up to this, what you needed to get prepared for it.
Okay.
How you might have prepared physically. Did you prepare physically?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I had good intentions and I just never did.
Yeah.
It came down to the wire, and as a lot of my friends who don't have kids don't get, even though they say they do, right? you really don't have time like you do when you don't have kids, or and I even or friends or coworkers I have that aren't married and don't have kids, and like they act like they don't have time or they need to take time off of work to do something. You just look at them like, really, man? Really? Like people used to look at me and I'd be like, yeah, whatever.
And so assuming in you saying that, you do have kids.
I do have kids, yes. I have 2 kids and I'm married. And
you're married.
Oh yeah. That's a good way to do things. But
bravo.
It is 2024. Anyhow,
so anyway, in preparation, gear wise.
So I borrowed a pack from you and in a sleeping bag because I was looking at gear, and those are probably your 2 highest price items aside from rifle spotting scope and a tent.
Yeah.
Right. And the outfitter provided tents. Yeah. Right. Which is pretty common.
No,
really?
Not at a lot of them.
Okay. I guess it depends on the area. And
I've worked for 2 outfits now where for sheep hunting, they provide tents if the guides and packers and clients want to use them. But the other one that I'd worked for in the past allowed you the option to bring your own. This outfitter for this fall wanted people to use
his tent,
a specific tent, whether you already had one or you want to borrowed one of his.
Right.
And they're totally fine. They're premium top of the line tents.
It kind of makes sense because that way you don't have a guy who buys a $50 tent on Amazon or Walmart and brings it up there and then has a terrible time.
Or even a high quality tent that's not built to take the wind that you could get
wind
up there.
Or snow that you could get. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, pack, sleeping bag that you borrowed from me.
Right.
aside from that, you pretty much had.
I had most of the stuff I needed, or I decided I was going to buy a little different version of it, right? I went and bought a different Jetboil because the one I had was old and wore out, and I wanted a new one anyway. So I went and bought the Mini Mo at the time. And
it's perfect because your name is Mo.
Yeah, I wanted one for a long time. They have a like a Mighty Mo or something like that now.
Oh, that's empowering.
Right. Right. The Mini Mo is kind of demeaning, right?
That'd be a great Instagram handle for you, Mighty Mo.
No, it's Modrenalin, by the way, folks. But anyway.
Slide into your DMs.
Anyway.
Just roll with it.
I didn't know what to say. Anyhow, so I picked up Jetboil. I had binos, bino harness, a lot of that stuff I already had. And so, I mean, really, it just came down to selecting the gear that I had, making a few new purchases. Like I said, the Jetboil.
Yeah.
I mean, it really came down to a lot of little things that I decided I wanted something specific that I knew. I got online and I watched Ryan Lampers, a gear dump from Ryan Lampers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Lampers was Stealthy Hunter, the title sponsor of our podcast here.
Yep.
And him and his buddy Brian Call do some gear dump videos, which of gear dump videos that I've seen are some of the best ones out there.
Yeah.
They go in depth and they just talk about everything that's in their pack.
But they don't focus on too much of the things that really are inconsequential.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And they've been doing this so much that they know how to get their pack down to weight and what a compromise was. And so obviously I had a little different ideas of what I wanted to carry and what I would need to carry.
Mm-hmm.
I never watched Brian and Ryan go on a sheep hunt.
Yeah.
Right. So that changes things. But I just use that. And that's the number one piece of advice I talk to anybody who says they're thinking about going sheep hunting is go find some gear dump videos.
Yeah.
Because that's really your gear is going to make or break your hunt.
Mm-hmm. Certainly can.
Obviously, physical fitness. I work a pretty physically demanding job.
Yeah.
So I really wasn't worried about it.
Yeah. I was going to mention that for people that don't know. You and I are both in our 20s.
Yeah.
Latter half, I suppose, sunset 20s for me, which is.
Yeah, you are there. Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife told me I was in my late 20s, and I was like, no. I'm not in the late 20s yet. Close, but I'm not there yet.
But the physicality of a mountain hunt, right? You mentioned like Brian and Ryan not having done a sheep hunt per se, but they routinely hunt.
They do the same kind of
black
hunts,
bears
just
in the southern U.S., in mountain goat country, and bighorn sheep country. And some of their stuff is even more steep and rocky and treacherous than a lot of our sheep country is in some places. Not all, but...
Night where we were hunting, that was easy.
Yeah, where we were, we had it pretty good for the most part. Although we had a lot of places that we couldn't go if we wanted to.
That's true. It got steep fast.
We were limited on where we could walk through, but we'll get to that later. But watching other guys' gear dump videos, like you said, and there are obviously always going to be two sides to
everybody's got
hunting crowd. And there are guys that would just laugh and say, I have no use for a gear dump video. I know what I need. But those guys have done it before.
Right.
For someone that's their first time, if you don't have someone to bounce all your ideas off of and go over to their house with all your gear and say, this is what I've got. What am I missing and what shouldn't I take? Because when you're carrying everything on your back every single day, most days.
Well, every ounce counts. It matters.
It does all add up. And that is important. And so if you don't need to carry an insulated Yeti thermos bottle, then maybe you shouldn't. And maybe there's something lighter out there, like you found, that's a better option than a Yeti, but it still does the same thing. And that might only be 3, 4, 5 ounces. But when you're
in the case of the Yeti versus the GSI Microlight, it was a lot more than 5 or 6 ounces.
Right. And then do you carry a water pump? Do you carry an inflatable thermarest pad or whatever brand you choose to go with, or do you carry a rigid foam pad? Like one, I guess not rigid foam, but one of those fold-up, old-fashioned foamy thermarests.
Yeah.
Do you trust
you
an
can
inflatable?
spend a lot of money on those today. They have fancy ones of those that are super light, and there's one of the guides out there. That's what he used.
Yeah, because he doesn't trust an inflatable mat.
And talking about contrasts, is I was looking for a level of comfort versus going, lightweight. Right. I didn't want to be 100 pounds, and I also didn't want to be 80 pounds going in.
Right.
But I also wasn't trying to go in 35 pounds.
Right.
And at the absolute minimum of everything I might need.
Right.
And, because that other guide that we just talked about, he takes that foamy thermarest pad and he doesn't have puffy gear and
not
he doesn't
for the first hunt. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of stuff and a lot of gear. Like his bag looks empty.
Yeah, it does.
But that's the direction he wants to take things.
Yeah.
Personally, I'd rather be a little more comfortable and carry a little extra weight.
Yep. He's done it enough where he knows what he can handle with that set of gear. And that as the month goes on and then you progress into the end of August and then beginning of September, as temperatures and conditions change inevitably, then he'll add certain things to his pack as he needs to. But he's also got some limitations physically.
Yeah.
He's had some injuries in the past. And so he's limited a little bit more on what he wants to carry. Not that he couldn't carry it, but he doesn't want to push himself to injury. So just kind of on that note of gear selection and slimming down, for people that are interested, at some point we will do an episode, possibly the next one, and talk about your experience with your gear. And we'll talk about what we used on the sheep hunt, what we didn't like, because I had some things that I didn't necessarily care for and didn't use very much, but I brought them and I didn't need to. And that's always something that I kind of like to troubleshoot with is I like to try new things. When possible, I like to experiment.
Oh, yeah.
Because otherwise, I don't know if I'm going to find something better or not. And I know a lot of guys, both guides and just hunters, that they're using the same thing from 30 years ago. And then they see somebody else pull something out of their pack and they go, man, that's a great idea. I'm going to go home and buy one. But their season's already over. And they have to wait till next year to use it.
You meet guys that don't use a bino harness.
Yeah.
And it kind of blows your mind. And they look at you and say, what's that purse for?
Yeah.
And everybody else has got one, right? But they don't like it, you know? And hey, more power to them. Hey, you talk about saving weight.
Yeah.
Good night. My bino harness is, I've got my purse and then I got all my accessories.
Wings, yeah. And I don't know if you're like me, but when I've got a pocket, I like to fill it up.
Yeah, that's what I
more
work
weight.
on adding more pockets, right? I have.
You just got to start wearing a bulletproof combat vest with pockets all over it.
So I've thought about it. No, I'm just kidding. I do think more stuff should have Molly on it.
You've mentioned that.
I end up boycotting, not on purpose. Not on purpose. I just don't buy gear because it doesn't have Molly on it.
It's not really a boycott.
It's not really a boycott. It just I don't buy the gear because they don't have, because about half of the companies that make a bino harness and attachments use some form of Molly, even if it's not the same pattern, it works together.
Yeah.
Right. FHF does. Vortex just came out with a new bino harness.
I saw that.
I got one. I love the thing.
You got the new Vortex one?
Yes. The Glass Pack Pro.
Really?
Oh, it's awesome.
I got to see
I've got
that
it in my truck. You can see it when we're done here. I'll have it in here at some point. But with that Vortex, everything else I have on there is FHF.
Okay.
Right?
So it's all compatible.
So because it has some loops, it's not the same pattern, but it has some loops where I was able to use the Molly style with it.
Yeah.
My backpack that I used was that Initial Ascent.
Yeah.
Right? No Molly. Why?
Why would you want Molly on a backpack?
So I can throw more stuff on it. More quickly accessible stuff. And I don't want Molly everywhere, right? Because Molly can outweight. A little bit of Molly on the lid, a little bit of Molly on the back.
Yeah.
And then Molly on the straps.
On the hip belt.
On the hip belt.
Yeah.
Right?
I could see how the hip belt would be a good idea.
Bino harnesses and hip belts, every other company, I should say, has their own proprietary attachments for.
Yes.
And it's kind of dumb.
They're not all compatible.
I did get an FHF water bottle holster, which was Molly, and just kind of rigged it into the attachment on the hip belt for my next sheep hunt that I went on.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. Which, you know what? Maybe that'd be the better approach. If we're going to talk about your foray into sheep hunting.
I'll talk about them both together when we're talking about gear.
Yeah.
Like the decisions I made because of the first hunt.
But we'll save that story for the next time.
That's a dedicated show right there.
Yes. Yes. So, spoiler, Mo loved sheep hunting so much that he came home and then took more time off work and went back out sheep hunting by yourself. Tough guy. But you were already in shape.
I was.
You'd already done well over 100 miles with us.
I did a lot of miles with you guys.
Yeah.
Then I went and did I don't know. I didn't have time to do a lot, but I did 30, I think, by myself.
Well, but you made it into some tough stuff.
And
which we'll talk about that
too.
Will. I found out information about that. Someone else.
Oh, yeah?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Anyway. So moving on, stepping into guide camp, you step out of the plane. You and I had gone a great distance to travel to get to this area of the state. It's very remote. In my opinion, it's the last great bastion of frontier. There's nothing around it. There's no town. There's no infrastructure. There is nothing. It would take you I don't even know how long. If someone were to try to walk
To where guide camp was?
from Fairbanks
Oh,
to
from
the,
Fairbanks.
yeah, from Fairbanks to even walk to that part of the state would take you,
A month at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. A month if you're covering a lot of miles every day.
so
Yeah.
that being said, very remote place, excellent operation, but you've never been into a guide camp before.
I hadn't.
And so people that are wondering, what's guide camp like? You step out of that airplane, first impressions,
First
thoughts.
impression was, wow, there's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard that's a little bit bigger
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to a lot of the guide camps in the
Yep.
state. That one was a little bit bigger for the number of people there, at least this year. And there's a lot of people. And I'm not the most talkative guy in public.
Yeah.
I get that a lot. People are like, hey, you're quiet.
Yeah.
You're pretty quiet. I'm like, well, I'd rather be thought a fool than open my mouth and remove all doubt, right?
Yeah. George Washington.
Actually, it's in Proverbs.
I know. I'm just pulling your leg.
Yeah, well, I just had to correct you.
Yep.
But anyway, so I got there and there's a lot of people here. And so, my typical approach is just to walk in, figure out where I belong.
Yeah.
And just to try to fit in. And you hear the saying, being the gray man, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's typically where I try to be in life in general, right? Until if I'm needed to step up and take a place, then I will.
Yeah.
But until I get there, I'm not trying to do that.
Right.
And found it works pretty well. It's worked out pretty well for me so far in life.
And just for reference for the audience, there were no clients in camp yet.
No, there weren't.
This was just guides, packers, and staff.
Yep.
At this point.
And so there was a lot of guides, right? And that night we get in there, we get assigned a tent, throw our gear in, and then there were some buildings there and stuff, and and they had permits for all that, and it's just I walked into there looking at it as I'm the new guy here, right? And given some time, I found out I wasn't the only new guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't the biggest noob there, right?
That's right.
And because I've grown up in this state, and sure, I hadn't been on this specific kind of hunt before.
Right.
But when it came to gear, I watched some videos. I asked you some questions. I put a pack together and said, "What do you think of this?" And you said, "Looks good." Right?
It's great.
And honestly, like I said, we'll talk about specific things later, but I don't feel like there's much I would have changed for that hunt.
No.
After having done that, I changed stuff in the next hunt because it was me by myself. And well, when you're by yourself, the lighter you can go, the better. And so I
carrying
cut
the whole sheep out.
I cut a lot, and I was carrying water.
Yeah.
And that changes a lot too. But with the guide camp, it was, you step in and there's a lot of guys, but fairly quickly, people introducing themselves to me, and how's it going? Okay, you're a packer. Oh, Dalton. Oh, who's Dalton? Because you were new there too.
Yeah.
And some guys knew you from other camps and around the state and whatnot. But it was like honestly, what I felt like after being there a couple days was it's almost like a church men's meeting.
Yeah.
Getaway. Nothing spiritual about it.
Yeah.
Saying that it's a bunch of hunting guides out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. You can leave the imagination open.
Normal shenanigans.
Yeah. But other than that, like it was the camaraderie, people getting along, and just we're all there with a common goal and purpose. And really, it didn't matter who we were otherwise. Oh, what do you do? Oh, you're a carpenter. A lot of carpenters in guide camp, right? But a lot of guys, a lot of blue collar guys. But there are guys there, and you'd never know it till you really got to talking to them. But they're worth, who knows how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in businesses, and if not millions, and you'd have no clue.
Yeah, very unassuming, very humble guys.
Yeah. And they just want to talk to you and hear about you. Yet they've been all over the world.
Yeah. Right.
I talked to one guy, and he was like, "Oh, I've been to India, and I wanted to go walk where Jim Corbett had been, so I went to India." You just wanted to go where Jim Corbett had been, so you went to India.
Who it is?
Oh yeah, that's who you're thinking it is.
Yeah, nice.
And
that's awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, and just the nicest guy.
Yeah.
But that's really what I appreciated about it the most was, and one of the things, like after spending a couple of days in guide camp, I thought, well, I haven't been on the hunt yet.
Yeah.
But if I enjoy that as much as I've enjoyed these few days in guide camp, then I'm coming back.
Yeah.
Right. I'm doing this again. This has been a blast. Like it's just, there's no cell service. There's no option for cell service.
There's no Starlink. There's no nothing.
All we had was an inReach, right?
Yeah.
Sat phone for emergencies.
Yeah.
But I had my inReach, which doesn't work that well when there's 50 inReaches in the same camp.
Do you think that actually makes a
Oh,
difference?
absolutely it does.
Really?
Satellite bandwidth.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just like, man, if you drive into Fairbanks in the middle of the day with AT&T, your internet's way slower than it is when you're at home a little ways out of Fairbanks. It's because of the bandwidth. It's the amount of devices trying to use. It's just like how many laptops and computers are on a router, a Wi-Fi router at the same time. It will slow it down.
Huh.
I'm convinced because when we were out in the mountains,
Yeah.
we had no issues. It was really good unless we were in a canyon or something, right?
Mm.
But as soon as we got back to the camp, it was slowed way down, even though we're not in the mountains anymore.
Right, right.
I think that had a lot to do with it.
Interesting.
There weren't-
Well, me
there weren't
not being a
50.
tech guy,
There weren't 50 inReaches,
Yeah.
but there were a lot.
me not being a tech guy, I'll just trust your judgment on that.
Hey, and if somebody's listening or watching this and says, "Oh no, you're way off on that. It's this," then you let me know. But I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, as far as like other guide camps are concerned, because I've been in a few different guide camps
Right.
around the state, and I had met this outfitter in a different guide camp
Okay.
through a different connection for a different outfitter. But this guy was working for and doing some of the flying for
Mhm.
that outfit. And he and I had spent some time together in that base camp and really just really hit it off and got along. And he ended up extending an invitation and said, "You should come up here and work for me." And I took him up on it because it's my favorite area of the state
Mhm.
to work in. And you saw why. It's a beautiful part of the state. The hunting is really great. And I'd heard a lot of really, really great feedback, both from clients that I had heard of that had booked hunts through with him and from guides that had worked for him. And then meeting him in person at that other camp, he and I just hit it off. And so I wasn't going to turn him down. And it was a great experience. And I agree with what you're saying there. You step into that camp and it's like you've known everybody for a lot longer than a couple of days.
Yeah.
It was instant unity
Right.
and a spirit of let's work together and get the
Mhm.
job done. And everybody was there for the same reason. Everybody was polite. Everybody was kind. Everybody's different. Obviously, you're not going to be best friends with everybody.
Oh yeah.
But
That's what I was saying.
that was a really unified attitude and a very positive attitude.
Mhm.
Everybody was there for the same reason. There was no ego going around. There was no hierarchy that everybody tried to,
Yeah.
you know,
Which I
put-
expected.
right. And I've seen that in other camps. But this was just a very outstanding, and when I say outstanding, I also mean very singularly different atmosphere than what I was expecting with that number of people. And the outfitter told me, he said, "I know you think you're going to like it, but you're really going to like it when you get here." And now I see what he means. It's a stellar operation. Anyway, so you get through the base camp.
Mhm.
We had a little guide meeting pre-season,
Yep.
went over a lot of the rules. We had some new guys there, some first-time guides and packers that, and then also just reiterating the rules and the stipulations,
Right.
and these are our parameters to operate in,
Mhm.
and kind of going over the basics and then going over some advanced things that needed to be talked about.
Mhm.
And that, again, that communication between the outfitter and the staff basically is really important. And it gives everybody a chance to ask their questions and clarify things. And then you spend the rest of the day after the meeting is over going over the maps and, okay,
Right,
where are you
right.
going? And one of the senior guides there that we became friends with throughout the season, he kind of took me under his wing and we walked in and looked at the map and he said, "Okay, I think you're going in here. I've hunted here, 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 and here. What you want to do is," and then he's drawing
Right,
lines on
right.
the map, and that kind of information for me going into a new spot to me, even though I've hunted these
Mhm.
animals before in this type of terrain, I didn't know that spot. And there are things that you need to know going into a brand new spot.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not need to know, but it saves you
It
time
sure
if you
does,
know
yeah,
them.
Right. Yeah.
And it did end up saving us some time
Did.
in
Saved
a
us
few
a lot of
different
time.
ways.
Saved us some miles.
Yeah, and not having to walk into a canyon thinking that we could make the pass and finding out that we couldn't make the pass. That's
Right.
days of travel that you lose
Right.
without someone who's been there before and already figured that out telling you about. And so again, that camaraderie and that willingness to share that information was really, really great. So we get out into the field, landed at a spot, and first day landed and started walking.
Yeah. Well, I got out there a day ahead of you guys.
That's right. You got dropped.
They dropped me off just to get me out of camp, get me out of the way.
Yeah, because we had clients coming in and he was just trying to get people out of camp.
So I went and camped off the airstrip in some trees and read a book and ate food and just honestly I really liked that. That was really nice. Just because the weather was great. It was like 60, 70 degrees. And
that day,
right. And the sun was out and it wasn't raining and almost had to worry about bugs. Like,
wow.
It was really nice. Like that one day was great.
Right.
And then, of course, you guys got there and I just watched my inReach until I got the text that you were leaving and I hiked back out to the airstrip and packed up my camp, hiked out to the airstrip. You guys got there and
so did the rain.
And away we went. Well, rain was another day, wasn't it?
We got rained on that day.
Yeah, we did. That's right.
A little bit. Not much, but we did a little bit. But in leaving the airstrip on the first day, we hiked out to the mouth of a canyon, which wasn't super far away. We got landed kind of in a main valley in the mountains. Hiked, a mile or so, give or take, and just wanted to camp at the mouth of a drainage because it was not sheep season yet.
Right.
And we didn't want to walk into the drainage. Again, with some of that prior shared intel, we knew that once we walked into this drainage, it was going to be tight, side to side. You were going to be well exposed and in view of any sheep that were on the side of that mountain on your way in that gorge. And so we elected that we were going to camp at the mouth, hang out for a night, and then wait for August 10th, where we could walk in that drainage. And as we walked, we could be hunting. If we saw a ram that was legal, we wouldn't have to worry about being spotted. We could just get hidden, get into range, and shoot the thing, which obviously didn't happen on day one, but it's the thought that counts.
Right.
We walked in there, and it was raining that day. Lightly.
It was. Yeah. Lightly, but consistently.
Yeah. It was like a steady mist all day long. Yeah. And the creek that we walked up, we did a lot of creek bottom walking just to be efficient and try to cover miles. And a lot of the area in that particular stretch of mountains that we were in was not easily summited. It was pretty craggy.
And if you could summit, walking the peaks wasn't really going to, or walking the ridges wasn't really going to happen.
Right. It was very, very steep, very broken mountaintops. It wasn't like there was one continuous ridge line that you could just climb up and then run on the ridge on the top at whatever, 6,000 feet. And so we walked in that drainage, walked up the creek, and we decided to make it in, 6 miles or so that day.
Yeah, something like that.
Being. And we wanted to get in about halfway point up that drainage so we could see to the top of the drainage, to the forks, and then back down out the mouth, where we could see most of the drainage from our particular camp bluff. We'd be near water, and we could sit there and give it a day or two minimum to see what moved through the area, because the sheep tend to move, right? After a couple of days, if anything is moving in sight of your feed areas that you can see, you'll catch them moving within a couple of day period, as long as you have good visibility. And so walking up the creek was not a big deal on day one.
No, not at all.
It was, 8, 10 inches deep at its most?
Maybe a foot.
Yeah, in some places. And we were usually able to just skip across. I didn't even put on rain gear walking in there. I don't think you did either.
I don't think any of us did. We just stopped and tarped up a few times.
Yeah, as it rained harder, we would stop and pitch a tarp up and sit underneath there and drink some water and eat a candy bar and dry off a little bit.
Right.
And then pack it up and keep on trucking.
We made good time too.
We did. And although I will say I hate river bottom rocks. Always have, always will.
Yeah, I hate them even more after packing a caribou out.
It's just
we'll get to
hard
that,
surface.
It's the constant angles of your ankles changing.
It's never flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you feel like you can never just
is. You got your moments of sand that may be 10, 20 yards. And then,
but you're always walking for the sand. You're always
even if
maneuvering.
It's soft, it's better than the rocks. Right. And these were big rocks. These weren't like, this isn't like pit run.
Yeah.
Pit run would be great.
Yeah. Like miniature boulders.
Yeah.
Probably 2 to 3 times the size of a softball.
And some of them bigger.
Yeah, some of them bigger. And anyway, not that they were slippery, but it was just uncomfortable.
I will say the big rocks that you could sit on were great though.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's part of sheep hunting. And you're either going to do that in the bottom or you're going to be climbing and doing a lot of vertical.
Right. In which case, you might be in even bigger rocks.
Yeah.
Slipping
Yeah.
and sliding on the lichen. So,
and we did that too. So we made it up in there, made it into camp, put up camp, glassed for a couple of days,
Mhm.
found rams almost immediately. I didn't even mention that we found rams at the very beginning,
We did.
like on day one, and we elected
saw a
to
bunch of sheep on day one.
pass on those rams. There was one, maybe two in there that would have made legality,
Right.
but we knew that we could have seen if there was anything with real trophy potential, we would have been able to see it through the spotting scope, and I could determine that there was not that ram in that group. And so we walked away from those sheep. Which, again, in other situations, if it was my first sheep hunt as a resident and I was killing a ram for
Right.
myself, I probably would have walked over there and gotten a closer look at one of those rams to see if he was
I certainly would have.
just barely
Yeah.
full curl, because I would have shot that ram for a first sheep. But again, for a trophy ram for a client,
Right.
not what you're looking for. So we walked in there, spent a couple of days, got within, what was that band with the wide one in there? They were, 1,000 yards away? Almost dead level with us from camp.
Yeah,
And,
something like that.
Yeah, that they weren't up super high, which was an oddity compared to everything else that we seemed to see. But there was a small band of rams, and in that was a very close ram on age. I believe he was 7, but he wasn't anywhere near full curl. I don't think that ram is going to live to be full curl. I think by the time he's 8, 9, 10 years
He'll
old,
get shot.
he's going to get shot. Anyway, so we looked at those rams, knew that there was sheep in the area. We were just kind of waiting to see if more would kind of filter through, because again, the intel on the area was the rams are on the move in there. It's a transition area, and they will come through, and sometimes you'll wake up in the morning and 500 yards across the canyon on the opposite mountain wall, there's going to be a ram sitting there looking at your tent and just staring at you, which we didn't have happen. But in that time span of being at that campsite, it rained. And it rained.
Did-
And it rained, and it rained, and it rained. And the creek went from 8 to 10 inches to about waist deep.
Close, yeah.
And we know that because other hunters came walking up the drainage. And I asked them, I said, how deep is the water down there? And they told us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we said, we're staying right
They
here.
pointed to their pants, yeah.
Yeah. We ended up trying to go up a side drainage at one point. We got kind of cliffed out.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a good situation. I had taken off my boots and socks and slung them over my shoulders and put on my my boating sandals, which are, the most middle-aged father figure sandals that you could probably own.
Yeah, they look just like my dad's.
My wife hates them.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Probably because they look like...
She hates them. She said they look like old man sandals.
Yeah.
But they have straps on the back and they stay on your feet. And they have
I brought
good
Crocs.
quality
but
soles.
I got Crocs with adjustable back straps.
See, mine are just the OG Crocs with just the little flip diff lockers. Not really great retention when you're in a fast-flowing mountain creek.
I like those things a lot, except for
I need to
climbing
get a pair
up the
of those.
tundra. They're slick.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
climbing back up to camp, like when I run down to get water or whatever.
That's the other thing, too, is after we crossed some creeks and I was in my sandals, I would just walk up the side of the tundra in my sandals, and they were fine because they didn't slip off your feet like Crocs
for the
would.
well, I never had them slip off my feet. It was just like I'd hit the right patch just right, and they'd be
Slide.
really, and they'd slide.
Yeah.
But
But I had taken my boots off to go up that side drainage near camp, and
that was deep water.
I went up to my thighs, and a rock rolled over and smashed me in the ankle, which I still have a little scar there, by the way.
Do you?
It hasn't gone away yet, and it's been 2.5 months.
My goodness.
Yeah, 8
Time
to 10
passes
weeks.
quickly, yeah.
8 to 10 weeks, which I quickly, when we got back to camp, put some tenacious tape on and a little bit of adhesive that the client actually had.
He did, yeah.
He had some weird colored
betadine, something like that. Yeah, it's a wound treatment.
Yeah. But it also helps tenacious tape stick to you.
Wasn't it Leukotape?
Yeah, it's Leukotape. Leukotape.
Tenacious tape might work in a pinch, but Leukotape's
I'm
better.
sorry. Did I say tenacious tape this whole
you said
time?
it several times.
It's Leukotape.
Yeah.
It's for your feet. Anyway, and so I put a little square patch of that, and it was on the inside of my right ankle. And when I felt the rock go over, I could feel that my foot got bumped, but I couldn't feel the
just so
pain
cold.
because it was just frozen cold.
Yeah.
And we had walked the better part of a quarter mile up that creek and out of the water in my sandals. And
and you even were climbing up over the cliff areas a little bit.
Yeah, and the client was in his tennis shoes and you were in your Crocs. No, you were in your
I was
boots.
in my boots because they got wet on the day in.
Yeah. So
I just said, screw it.
Yeah. I think that was one of the funniest moments of the trip. When you walked up to that creek and we were looking at it and the client and I were saying, I think we're going to take our boots off. We don't want to get our boots soaked right now. We don't need to. We'll just put our put our water shoes on. And you looked at us and out loud and kind of in a raised voice because it was raining so hard and you wanted us to hear you. You said, my feet are wet. You just tromped across the creek. The client sat there and laughed for probably 5 minutes. Said, that's great. So you trudged on ahead to look at the canyon wall. Because
I just shot ahead while they picked their way through and just trying to get an idea of where to go so I could point out the shallow spots and whatever.
Meanwhile, every creek crossing, the client and I are standing on the other side of the creek going, can you feel your calves? No.
I have at least a video of you guys walking up the creek after me and with your neat pants rolled up.
I had my pants rolled up around the middle of my thighs. And I'm sure that looked great going up the mountains. But we got there. I hit my ankle on that rock, didn't think anything of it. It ended up scabbing over and making a huge mess, and it really hurt the rest of the trip. I really regretted making that decision because instead of going around and up and over the side of the hill like you had,
that's right.
I thought, I'll just cross it right here, and then I can get over there to where you're at to go up and look at the spot.
It was that real narrow spot.
Yeah, and it was all choked down. The water was twice as deep as it was downstream from there where I'd just been crossing, and there was a boulder that kicked free. And so, paid the price for that one, but it is what it is. That's part of it. But we got in there and pretty quickly realized that was not worth the risk of going up and around that cliff. It was a bad fall line. Had one of us slipped on the shale slope right there, we only had a 10-yard buffer before you slid off of a 50, 60-foot cliff.
Would have been picking you up with a stick and a spoon.
Yeah. We would have slid down into what the creek had turned into a bedrock
probably would have
side.
Bounced off the other cliff side and then down into the,
The creek necked down into a very, very narrow and then into bedrock where the water was
just cut through, and it was like 8 feet deep in a spot in there.
Yeah, it was very, very deep.
And then where it cut kind of under the rock, so you couldn't like jump back and forth.
Yeah.
You could to a point, but then the rock cut over.
You would have had to go underneath the rock into the creek
where
to
it was
get
too
through
deep.
it.
And,
right. And so it was a bad fall line.
Yeah.
Point being is we didn't think it was worth the risk to get back into this little side drainage. We'll never know because we didn't even go.
Nope.
We came back out, dried off. I fixed my foot or my ankle, and we persevered. And probably a day or so went by after that the rain had subsided, and we were able to walk way up that drainage. Did a big loop up and back.
Water had started to go down at that point.
Yeah, and then we came back into camp, and I'd made the decision that we were going to go back down the drainage towards the mouth and check one more spot in a side bowl. And if we didn't find a ram in there, then we were going to pack up camp and go back up and go over a big pass and then go into new country. All the while, knowing that the client also has a caribou tag.
Yep.
And the farther away we walk from an airstrip, the longer it's going to take you or all of us, depending on how far it is, to carry a caribou. And so we walked back out towards the mouth of the drainage. All this time up to this point, we had left camp in our first camping spot about 6 miles in. We were in the middle of this drainage, up and down. We walked back down the drainage, hiked up, gained a little over 1,000 feet or so.
1,000, 1,500. I think it was close to 15.
Okay. So it was about 1,500 feet, but it wasn't rocky. It was all soft, kind of tundra side hill.
Steep, but
it was straight up and down. But you're counting your paces.
Yeah.
And we'd look at each other and I would say, okay, 60 paces. And then we'd stop for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, catch your breath. Okay, 60 more paces. And it's amazing
how fast you can just get up.
Fast. If you just pace yourself and you don't just run out of gas, because you might be able to go 100 or 120, and then you're, pushing your heart back down your throat because you're just completely out of breath. And yes, it's going to happen and you're going to have to do that eventually. But if you can pace yourself, and the client had some injuries from that summer that he was nursing along. And he was in good shape as it was, but he's normally in better shape. And he hadn't been able to exercise walking with a pack all summer. And so he was saying that he felt like his lungs were out of gas and that he wasn't in shape at the beginning, which I think everybody starts out sheep season being a little bit pooped. If you're not, then, well, you're probably David Goggins. I don't know, or Cam Hanes or somebody like that.
Somebody
right?
who constantly works out and prepares for that. You know, I was at work the other day, and my coworker, one of my coworkers, who's a hunter, who of all the coworkers I have, who I would probably be willing to take on almost any kind of hunt, because I know the guy well enough to know that I could trust him on just about any kind of hunt.
Yeah.
Right? If I was going to have to pick any of them, it'd be him. He was wearing a weight vest.
Oh,
it looked kind of funny. It looked like a bulletproof vest kind of funny thing. And I was like, you got somebody threaten you or something? He goes, no, I'm preparing for sheep season next year.
Really?
Yeah. And so here it is. It's October.
Wow.
Right. And he's
Good
got
for
a weight.
him.
He goes, I got about 30 pounds. I was like, oh, you got to pump those numbers up. And he goes, well, I just went for a hike up Angel Rocks with 65 pounds, but I'm just trying to, good for him.
This time of year too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
good for him.
And he goes, yeah, no, I'm going to do more hikes with more weight. I'm going to bring I'm going to be carrying more weight. But me and my dad and a friend of ours are going to go on a sheep hunt. And
good.
And so I'm preparing for it.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, good for you, man. I didn't prepare at all physically. I just went for it. And I did fine.
Oh, yeah.
I would have done a little better, but I really didn't. It didn't affect me all that much. I also am in my 20s.
Right.
I'm told when you get a little older, it starts to affect you more.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't know, but I'm getting there.
Yeah.
One sheep season at a time. So anyway, we climbed up that hill, made it up there, and we could see what we wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
We found sheep pretty quick, but it ended up being just ewes and lambs that were up at 5,000 plus feet.
Yeah.
They were way up there.
They were way up there.
And obviously didn't find any rams right away. Didn't find any rams from that spot at all, I don't think.
I don't believe we did.
And we could see a lot of country from up there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we got up there mid-afternoon, something like that.
It was around that, yeah.
And I had said that we wanted to wait until evening feed time when all the rams had been getting up to feed and moving around. Because in case there were rams bedded out of sight, that we could see that area that they were in.
Right.
When it became dinner time, they'd get up and hopefully mosey around enough and expose themselves, and we could get a look and see if there was any rams in the area. So we sat there and waited for a good several hours.
It was, yeah.
And pretty soon after we'd sat down, we found a few caribou. We'd seen a decent bull caribou at camp walking in on day one, like just before we got to our little bluff.
Something any resident would have shot.
Yes. And I looked at it, and my first look was a profile view.
Right.
And I was tempted to say, shoot it. But then he looked towards us, and he was narrow, and I saw his fronts, and they weren't really impressive on both sides. And so
the more you looked at him, the smaller he got.
Yeah. And so I told the client, because he said, I that looks like a pretty good one to me. I mean, you tell me, right? And that's the pressure.
That's where you're the guide.
Right. And so I told him, I said, I know what's in here. I know what caribou we're looking for. Like I have a picture in my mind, and I know what mature caribou in this area look like. We should wait. It's day one.
That's not it. Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, by day 4 or 5, where we're at right now in the story, we're looking at these caribou, and none of them were as big as that one.
What do they say? Don't pass up on day one what you'd shoot on the last day.
Yeah. That's the golden rule. But with guiding, that's a little bit different.
When the client's paying a lot of money.
Right. And when they're looking for a trophy class animal, there's a balance to be found. Now, some clients just want a caribou.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of them don't
decent
care.
bull.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really concerned about it. They'll just shoulder mount it, and or they'll have the hide tanned and have a wall hanger made out of it, and they'll just do a European of the skull and antlers.
Right.
It's everybody's personal choice. But point being, we got up on this knob. We're looking at these ewes and lambs. We see some small bulls. One of them we looked at that was bedded down there across that flats.
Yeah, he was tall but not wide.
Yeah, he was tall, but he didn't have a lot of points, and he wasn't wide. And usually what I'm looking for in a good bull is double body width in the spread. If I can fit 2 of those chest cavities inside of the rack at its widest point from a frontal view, then that's good on width. And then I like to see a good mature bull come up and then curve back forward.
Mhm.
I like to see that that feature, I guess,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
rack. That just is a sign that it's a mature bull.
And you don't see that in all the caribou herds
No,
up here.
you don't.
Some of them don't have that at all.
Right.
But
And some of the bulls that get really, really big don't curve forward like that.
some of them just kind of go up and kind of
palmade out.
and they just kind of they're just kind of almost straight up there
Right.
with just a little
Right.
crook in the antler.
Right. But this one that we were looking at, I was comparing it to the one that we'd seen on the first day.
Right.
And I said, man, I think he's about the same, and he's not anything that
he was taller, but he wasn't.
Yeah,
He wasn't anything crazy.
Yeah, he's nothing more special than the first one was.
Mhm.
And so we let him go. He just laid there. There was a few more in the bottom in this hanging bench, I guess, that was a swamp at
It was
4,000 plus
Yeah.
feet, which
It was kind of a bowl up there.
yeah, and that really throws clients for a loop when they climb 1,500 feet
And they step in water.
and then they step in knee-deep swamp water.
Yeah. In grass, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Alaska for you, though.
Yeah.
It's all swamp.
And so we sat there, and I was hoping that the rams would get up, if there were any in the area, by around 7 or 8 o'clock or so, somewhere in that window for the evening feed time. Because that's when every other ram had been getting up. It was about 7 to 7:30, sometimes 8 o'clock. And we'd see all the rams that we'd seen previously, they were getting up around that time. And so I wanted to sit on this glassing vantage point until 9:30. Well, we sat there, and about 7 or 7:15 up over the hill above us on this small peak,
Mhm.
I see tops.
Right. Well, we'd seen one caribou over
Yeah, that's right. We'd
Right.
seen one that we had again passed on. Well, then I looked back up there for some reason with my binoculars on my tripod, and which tangent, binoculars on a tripod.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's a great thing to have. And I didn't even have the right adapter.
You're just holding
I took
them.
an orange twist tie,
Oh, that's right.
set my binos
That's
on my
right.
Arca rail on my tripod, and ran it up through the middle of the binos through the Arca adapter, and just twisted it, and then just used the pan on the tripod and just looked. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll go back away from that on a hunt like that, where
Right.
you're doing long periods of glassing. When you're just scanning to find
Right.
animals.
And saving the spotting scope for more of a
Right.
like ID.
Right, exactly. So I had the binoculars on that ridge. For some reason, I was doing a big scan again, and I saw antler tops, and I thought, that looks like a different bull. And all I could see was his tops. I put the binos down, got my spotter up, looked at it, zoomed in a little bit, and I could see that the width, all I could see was his tops, and I could see that the width was way wider than the one before.
Yeah.
And I immediately said something out loud. I said, oh, you got to be kidding me. And
This is going to be a late night.
And the client immediately responds with, you found a big caribou, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did. And he's way up there on that peak. But it's evening, and everything else is moving in this bowl. So maybe they're going to come down and feed closer to us. Because as it was where they were, we would have had to go down off of our ridge, cross the swamp bowl, and then run another ridge all the way up to where they were. And it probably would have taken us an hour or more to get there.
Chancing that the caribou are going to still be there when you get there.
Because caribou never stand still for that long.
No. Or if they only do that when you're looking at them. As soon as you move, even if they can't see you, they move.
Yeah. That's just how it goes. So we decided to just sit tight. They started to feed down the hill, and then the other bull from earlier rejoined him.
Yeah.
And they were working together down this
They're
hillside.
kind of like down and away.
Yeah.
And so you guys headed kind of down towards that way because you're going to shoot across the gap.
Right.
Right.
Which would have been 300 yards, 250.
Right. The direction they were heading.
Right.
And so my thought process when you guys did that was the same thing. Like, they look like they're going that way, but what if they don't?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't join you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, not to
came in clutch.
Not to talk about myself like I'm some great guy here, but like having an experienced packer, like who knows how to hunt, like really made a big difference.
When the client and I picked up our packs, I said, we're going to side hill and go down this way and try to get even with them as they come down the hill and kind of meet them in the middle at the bottom. And you said, I'm going to stay high, keep my elevation and glass, and tell you if they go somewhere else. And I said, great. And we just booked it. We only made it like 80 yards.
Yeah.
And then I see the big
over
bull.
the edge there.
I see the big bull from across, like 500 yards. Look,
Right.
right at us. And I said to the client, I said, freeze. Just wait. Don't move. Don't sit down. Don't move your pack. Don't move your gun. Just sit still. Is he looking at us? Because caribou don't usually do that.
Especially at that distance.
Yeah.
But these are big bulls and they're up high for a reason.
Yeah,
There had to be something.
I've had that situation
Because that wasn't
before.
the first caribou look at us and disappear. We had a caribou earlier in the hunt look at us and disappear. Remember?
We were 1,000 yards away from that one.
I know.
I don't think he saw us.
It's hard to say, but
I think that one was just running just to run.
It could have been.
Because we saw him the night before doing the same thing.
That's true.
Because he was running the night before.
That's true.
But this particular pair of bulls, the one big one that the client ended up shooting, busted us and just stared us down. And then started going the other way.
Yep.
Not running away back over the ridge.
Just cross-hilling.
But just side-hilling back.
Back the direction where we had been sitting and spotting.
Perpendicular to where you were at on your ridge, where we had started off at. So we kind of paralleled him, and he would kind of look over, and then he would just keep on walking. He didn't spook. He just changed directions.
Right.
And so it's hard to say if he really was on to us, or if he just noticed something was moving, and then he just made a caribou decision and just walked the other way.
Direction, yeah.
It's impossible to know. But regardless, he walked back up, and as he walked parallel, the ridge came back down.
Yeah, and so he kind of walked around to the ridge.
And he decided to just walk up on top, and then I could see his butt and his tops of his antlers, and he was feeding right on top of that ridgeback right there. And so I said to the client, we got to get more elevation. And that's when you came down to meet us, and you said, they're just right on top
because I saw the same thing, like looking our way. And so I dropped some of my gear. I cut around the back. I ran around the back of that knoll.
Yeah.
To meet up and be like, hey, he is right on top there. What you think you can see is what you can see.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I'm going back. Like, follow me. Yeah.
We went back up there behind you. We got to a vantage point, and then the bulls went over a little bit and then circled back up and then came back down. And by that time, you had lent the client your pack to shoot off of.
Because he dropped all his stuff for shooting off of before. Yeah.
We were on an incline about like that.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get prone and shoot off his bipod, shooting downhill like that and then up across canyon.
Right.
He didn't have enough elevation to do that. And so you gave him your pack, which he sat down on his butt behind.
And then just kind of hugged it and pulled it into him and used it as a rifle prop.
Right. Yeah. And then had your pack upright right in front of him where he could hold on to it and shoot. And he had a great platform there. Gave me time to set up my tripod and spotter and put my Olin phone adapter on the spot and scope because I wanted to get the shot on film. And he went ahead and fired off at 350.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
And it was all on film.
Yeah.
And he made a perfect heart shot.
Amazing shot.
Perfect shot.
For having run and everything he'd done, and then to be on a backpack and not on a sticks or something.
Prone. Yeah. And there was some wind.
Yep, there was. And we were waiting for wind to drop, and we had to wait. There was all, I mean, what was just described really made this, what went down much simpler.
Yeah.
The amount of times I ran back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you guys set up and then picked up and moved and then and set
because
up and then picked up and moved.
Kept moving.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So it all worked out. And he presented us with a shot, a broadside shot at 350, and it was a one and done. That was it. He shot him, and the bull humped up a little bit, took off running like mad, made it 15, 20 yards.
Yep.
And I could see, you can see it in the footage.
Right.
You can see him run over the hill, and as he's cresting the top where we can still see his body, you can see a big red pump of blood coming out of the shot. And you could see the tops of his antlers start swaying, then he went down.
Yeah.
It was perfect. Got over to him, took our pictures with him, and beautiful backdrop.
It was.
Caribou and sheep country. Sun in our face.
It turned out nice that day, didn't it?
You and I and all the pictures are like this.
Squinting.
Squinting into the sun. And our client, who's from a very sunny part of the country, just eyes wide open.
Yeah.
He said, I'm used to looking into the sun, man. Well, we are not. And so we got our pictures and we got them all taken apart that night. It was a great help having you as the packer who knows how to take apart an animal and a client who's taken apart a lot of animals.
Mhm.
So everybody was busy doing something. We had that caribou taken apart.
Very
And
quickly.
then once I was able to get the head off, because he was doing a shoulder mount,
Right.
once I was able to get the head off of the carcass, I left the rest of it to you guys. And I was able to skin out the head and get
Right.
all that done and get what was the lower jaw off? I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah. We took the lower jaw off.
Yeah. So I was able to skin out the head, get the hide off of the face and skin
Mhm.
that all out, and then get the lower jaw off of the skull to lighten the pack. And then by that point, you guys had the rest of the caribou done and in game bags. You and I did a quick walkthrough on the carcass, made sure everything's clean, perfectly up to snuff,
Yeah.
no waste whatsoever. And there wasn't a scrap of meat left on that sucker. And we got everything laid out in a spot where it would get some airflow and cool
Airflow
off.
was cool, kind of away from the bushes a little bit.
Yep. And we
But
got
in a depression.
and we got all the meat and everything away from the carcass.
Yep.
So that if a grizzly bear did find it, hopefully he'd find the stinky gut pile that we poked open
and
at the
play
end
with
of
that.
it
Yeah.
and went to the stink first.
Which I did walk over there the next day and nothing had shown up.
That's great. So we left it there that night because that kill spot was closer to the airstrip where that would get picked up
Mhm.
than camp was. And so we made the decision. You were going to go back the next day and pack the caribou out to the strip.
Yep.
The client and I would continue to sheep hunt
Right.
and try a couple of different side drainages and, let the client get a little bit of rest after that day. And again, kind of nursing his potential to aggravate a pre-existing injury and give him a relatively eased in to the beginning of the
Mhm.
sheep hunt and kind of let him build back up his aerobic ability, get his
Yeah.
lungs back going, which he later on said was what saved him in being able to continue all the way through the whole sheep hunt because he did really, really well. And he didn't think he'd be able to do that. But he said later on, after you'd had to go home, he said, having an easy start and having some bad weather days to rest in really gave him a
Right.
break to just recover and then go from fresh again. And so that ended up being what we did the next day. You walked back over there, took the caribou back out to the airstrip, and I'll let you go over that.
So this is where a packer really comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Because it
Yes,
doesn't
I was-
occupy our time.
it felt awesome to be a part of the kill,
Yeah.
right? And to be a major part of the kill and cutting up the caribou and and all of that is a part of it if a packer is able to do it and has the skill.
Right.
And there were other guys in camp who were first year packers.
Yep.
And first time packers and who would not have had that ability, who would have had to be taught as they were going.
Yeah.
But the real reason I'm there is to save you guys time and weight.
Mhm.
If we're all packing, it saves a trip.
Right.
If I'm packing by myself and you guys are off hunting, well, it lets that client's valuable time that he's paying for be used to hunt instead
Right.
of just carry meat.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so I don't remember how far it was, 5-6 miles to the strip.
yeah, about that.
And well, we already said this caribou was 1,500 feet off the bottom.
Mhm.
And the drainage, we had gone in. There were 2 drainages that went into this bowl around a hill.
Yep.
We climbed that hill. Caribou was spotted and shot from that hill.
Mhm.
And then we crossed down the other drainage, which is about the same elevation as the bowl, up, got the caribou. So I just hiked up the closest drainage to camp, which is pretty gradual, right? Up a creek, up around the edge, a little bit of steep in there, but not really. And then through the bowl, swampy bowl, over to the caribou. And I decided I was going to do something, probably not the smartest thing I've ever done, but I wanted to try it.
It's because I said I tried it once.
It was because you tried
wasn't
it once, and I've heard, who's the guy that carries a whole elk?
I don't know, but he's used those
I know,
initial
yeah,
ascent
Brian
packs.
Call knows it
Yeah.
and all that, yeah.
Yeah. I think he used to be an Olympic skier or something.
He was
like
in,
that.
yeah, something crazy, and he's a big guy, and anyway, so I was like, okay, well, somebody can carry a whole elk, I can probably carry a whole caribou, and so I took that initial ascent pack. I took the pack off that morning and just
Mhm.
had minimal survival essentials with me. If I ended up having to stay the night, I'd be able to at least not freeze to death, right?
Because you had the lid and then the little pannier.
I had the lid and the pannier, right? And with the lid and the pocket and the pannier, I had just enough room. I think they make I need to look that up, but I think
they have a little day pack.
do they have a day pack that attaches onto it? Yeah, see, I need to get that.
Yeah.
For that specific situation, because I wouldn't mind having the extra space on the outside of my main pack anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
But so yeah, I had my circ,
Mhm.
which is what I had for a puffies.
That's a Stone Glacier
That's the
synthetic
Stone Glacier
jacket.
synthetic. Yeah. And then I had
And your rain gear?
I had my rain gear. I don't know if did I have all my rain gear? I think I had all my rain gear.
I think you did.
And I just had just enough insulation in rain gear and my tarp. I had my tarp.
Yeah.
Just enough to survive and a few snacks and whatnot.
Yeah.
And
water was readily available.
And water was readily available. Thankfully, that was nice. So and all I brought was one cup, right?
Yeah.
I didn't need two, just one bottle. And and so I hiked back to the Caribou, which was like 2.5 miles from camp, and loaded the whole pack up. I mean, and then did the wiggle into the straps and then roll to the side and wiggle and finally got upright. And like, well, once you're standing, it doesn't feel too bad.
And so for a full caribou, just to give perspective, we're talking 4 quarters.
4 quarters.
On the bone.
On the bone.
Rib meat, neck meat, back straps, tenderloin.
Hide and rack.
Brisket.
Yep.
Shoulder mount cape.
Yep.
And skull and antlers.
There's a lot of weight there.
On a pretty large rack.
Yeah.
For headgear.
So I was being conservative with my estimates on weight at the time. And I was thinking 150 pounds or so.
Yeah.
Since then, knowing what my pack weighed at like on this other sheep hunt I talked about going on, that was more than 150 pounds. It had to be.
That's a lot of weight.
It was a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So I got it all. I got under it, and I had to be 170, 180. It had to be up there.
Yeah.
And
Probably.
I got under it, and I started moving, and I'm kind of side hill and downhill, pretty gentle slope. But
in that soft grass, musky.
It was hard
garbage.
up there.
Oh, was it?
Right. Remember where the kill itself was on hard ground.
Well, right.
So that was where I started, right? And I'm working my way around that. And I didn't really have to walk in the soft stuff with that.
Okay.
Because it went down that next drainage, which looked beautiful to go down from the top.
There was caribou tracks going down. Oh, yeah,
this beautiful trail. But then it kind of cut and you didn't see it anymore. And I had made a joke the night before. Yeah, I bet you there's a drop off over there, you know, but whatever. I'll figure it out. Anyway, I made it about a quarter mile. I didn't even make it past, the grassy part.
Yeah.
And before I was doing the stop, breathe. There's a bush 10 yards away. I can make it to that bush.
Yep.
Stop, breathe. And I was just
goals.
like, I finally was like, okay, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do this 5 miles.
Yeah.
And so I finally got to a spot, unloaded it, cut down to half the pack. Now I could not carry the antlers out before the meat, right? The antlers have to be in the second load every time, which did change how I would have loaded the pack. But I believe I did. How did I do it? I think I should have written this down or something, exactly how I broke it up. But I tried to break it up in what I thought was half. But the first load was definitely heavier than the second load. But
did you have the hindquarters in the first load?
I think I did. I think I had the hindquarters and then all the other meat.
Yeah.
And then I had front quarters, hide, and rack.
Yeah.
In the second load.
I would have done the same thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I would have done the same thing.
And the second load was lighter. But I got, so then I got down, it was about a mile or so of this nice green strip that just was beautiful, heading down the bottom. And I get to the down there where it looks like it's just going to keep working down through willows. And, it gets real rocky, real steep, real fast. So next thing I know, I'm side hill and caribou trails in the shale and granite over. So what I ended up doing was shuttle carrying this to get to the bottom because I'm 1,500 feet off the bottom to start, right? I dropped a couple hundred in that first quarter mile. And then I got it all past the rocks onto green tundra that was a little more gentle and rolling to get down to the bottom. So I carried the first load, carried the second load, and then loaded up back in the same what I had done as my first load, headed down to the bottom, and then out. And I don't remember how long that took me anymore.
You kind of blocked it out of your memory.
No, it's funny how it's been what, 10 weeks, whatever.
It's just the details, just
all those details that seem so close. And I'll never forget this. And all of a sudden here I am going, what was the...
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't remember how long that took me. It was had to be a good 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
To get that all the way out. I remember it taking me a lot longer than I thought it would. And I had an audiobook going in one earbud just because that makes we talked about how bad those bottom rocks are.
Yeah.
And in that pack, that load had to be very close to 100 pounds.
Yeah.
And not the greatest proportion the way the weight was on my back either, as much as I could. But the way, some of the chafing I was having with the pads and stuff, I haven't had again since that load.
Yeah.
Like that's why I say that. Like I was over 75 pounds on another pack load, and I have not had anything as uncomfortable
Yeah.
as that was.
Just weight distribution.
Just weight distribution and where I was getting rubs and stuff. And I haven't had that. Like the pack is handled really well, except for that load, which means that load was just stinking heavy.
Yeah, just awkward.
And so anyway, got out to the strip, and I'm looking at the time, like there's another load up there. Anyway, so I got close to the strip. I don't know how far I was, maybe half a mile, a quarter mile from the strip. So strip's in the middle of the valley, we'll say. River's on the other side of it. And then there's a swamp between the strip and the valley we were up. Well, with all that weight, it was a half mile to go straight to the strip, or 3/4 of a mile, or a mile to go around. I went straight through the swamp. I just like, screw it. I
didn't know you did that.
Oh, yeah. No, it was wet. A straight line.
Through the tall brush.
It wasn't quite like it looked when you got down there. Yeah, the brush was a lot more dispersed.
Huh.
And if you hit the right angles and stuff, really what was deceiving was all from up high where you could see water.
Yeah.
And then tundra. That tundra was floating on top of water. a lot of it. And so,
you're picking your way through that.
I was wet. But I was like, I'd rather get a little bit wet.
But your boots were already wet.
And it was a nice day.
Yeah. Yeah.
My boots were already wet. And I was like, I'd rather just get wet, cross. And so I went straight over. I found a spot under some bushes where the meat could stay out of the sun and whatnot. Stashed it.
Yeah.
Messaged one of the pilots from camp, like, this is where the first stash of meat's at.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the second stash. Give me 4 hours. And that was as best of an estimate, like the fastest I thought I could possibly make it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'll be able to do this, but I'm going to try. So I got back in like an hour, right? Because when I'm traveling light.
You feel like you're just floating at that point.
Loaded up, right? Well, and we had a food stash near the strip that I snagged and brought in with us.
Yeah.
I brought halfway back in, stashed it, went up the hill, got the rest of the load, got out, and I think I messaged the camp and the pilot that I had the final load at like 10 o'clock.
That night.
It was getting dark.
Yeah.
And I got there. I got all the meat right up next to the strip under another set of bushes, right on the cold ground, made sure it was all set good. And then laid down out of the wind on my back.
Yeah.
Took the pack off and just laid down and put my circ on, I think. And and just sat there with the inReach out in the open, and my phone laying on my chest, listening to an audiobook and waiting to hear back. Like, do I need to sit here and wait? What do I need to do?
Yeah.
And then like, all right, well, they'll come get the meat tomorrow.
Yeah.
Head back to camp. Cool. So I got back to camp at like 1 a.m.
Yeah, it was late. Yeah, the night that we had shot the caribou on our hike back to camp, because we didn't even get back to camp that night until a little after midnight.
Yeah.
It was
and so
just about too dark.
I got started at like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the client and I had been glassing some sheep, and then we had seen bear tracks, though, fresh from that day that we shot the caribou on the way back to camp from shooting the caribou.
Yeah.
And the bear was in our valley somewhere. And so he and I were watching the bottom.
Looking for that bear.
At almost dark. And I'm looking the bottom, because it's too dark to go after a sheep now anyway. But I'm looking for that bear. And then I see you coming back. And the first thing I thought, because I didn't think that you'd be back that soon, because I had gotten your inReach message saying, got everything to the strip. And then I had talked to the pilots as well. And they had said, we couldn't make it. We'll be there first flight in the morning to get it. We'll get it taken care of. And they did. I mean, they were there first flight. There was good weather the next day, and they knew that. Otherwise, you would have had to, probably camp out or at least tarp it off and then go back and get your tarp type of deal. Or leave your tarp there and they would take it. But we knew what the weather was going to be. It was going to stay dry, and you had it, in a dry area. It had air around it. That's not really a concern for that day.
Right.
And so they ended up getting it the very next morning. But I'm at the tents, and the client and I are kind of looking different directions. He's looking up drainage. I'm looking down drainage. And I just see something moving in and out of the willows in the creek bottom. And I said, bear.
That's right. I got in the camp, and you're like.
And the client looked over, and he goes, is it? And then I pull up my binos. No, it's Mo. Dang it. because you were so close to camp, I thought, man, this is going to be a cinch. We'll shoot this bear and Mo get here just in time to help us skin it.
So my takeaways from that pack out.
Yeah.
Because that's a packer's job, right? That's the initiation. That's and
every guide has to go through that.
And I did it in my first load, right? The heavy load, which the second load wasn't that much lighter, but it was lighter.
Yeah.
My first load halfway to the strip. Well, and there was a rise that was 100, 200 feet that you had to climb up.
Right at the mouth.
Right at the mouth. And then you're a mile from the strip at that point. That was the worst 100 feet.
After all that.
After that, all those miles.
Yeah.
And then I got to climb.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it was somewhere in there with the first load where mentally, right? Mentally, I'm not going to give up. But this is where I don't know if I ever want to do this again.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what, like, because like I said, back in guide camp, I'm like, if this hunt goes well and I like it, then I'm coming back.
Yeah.
And here I am at with this first load, just, I'm going to finish the job. I'm not going to quit. I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again. And I remember stopping and sitting on a rock and thinking that, like, getting the weight off my back a little and pushing the straps up and letting things rest and sitting there like, I don't know if this is worth it to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I finally got that first load out and got back and got the second load. And by that point, by the time I got to the same point where I remember thinking that on the way out with the first load, I was thinking, I'm almost there.
Mm-hmm.
This feels awesome.
Yeah.
I would do this again. Right. It was just that, no, this was worth it. When the finish line was in sight. Right. And, but then, and I mentioned using audiobooks, earbud with an audiobook to pass the time, which is a great, takes a little battery, but it's worth it. But on the way back in the dark, I'd seen even more bear tracks, right? And I don't know if he left out of the mouth or where the bear went. We never saw him.
Yeah.
But I wasn't using earbuds on the way back. It was like, I gotta be able to hear.
Yeah.
Because
especially when you start losing light.
Right. Right. Because and all I had for defense was a handgun because
less weight.
I'm a packer and there's
I've
already
got a
two
rifle
rifles.
And the client's got a rifle. Yeah.
So I had a SIG P320 X10. I'm a big SIG fan. You guys will find that out.
Now, as a caveat, I wouldn't tell most people that it's a good idea to have in an earbud while you're hiking in bear country. And most of Alaska is bear country.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's up to you, right? It's personal choice.
Yeah.
You've grown up around bears. This is wide open country for the most part, especially where most of your pack out was. Right. You could see, it's not like you were going to come around a corner and then 10 yards away there was going to be a grizzly bear staring at you in a full charge. That wasn't going to happen in your situation.
Right. Well, there's a few willow areas and stuff, but for those spots, I stopped, took my earbuds out, listened, and I went into a different mode, right?
Right. Exactly. So don't listen to Mo's story and think that he's just walking out there jamming out on an audiobook with both earbuds in.
No, one earbud.
Right. And then stopping the audiobook when you get to a spot, pay attention.
Right. Pulling the earbud out so I have
switch on.
Full ears.
Yeah.
And I think even there was a point or two there on the hike back in, I may have even had the gun in my hand, right? Like
Yeah. But by the time you came back in, walking through some of those river willows, there were spots where I even, walking through some of those willows, put my rifle at the low ready, thinking.
Well, and it was dark on my way back in.
Right. And with you having low light, you can't see a bear.
Right.
Unless he comes out in the open in a full
I had
charge.
used zero flashlights or anything because it was open enough and it wasn't overcast.
Yeah.
So I was able to see with enough ambient light from the stars.
Right.
I had good night vision, but and tritium sights on that.
Yeah.
It would have been great.
Another plug for the SIG handgun.
Yeah.
Well, you did a great job. And I had told you prior to that hunt, I said, I really want you to come up here and do this. My only stipulation is don't quit.
I told you I wouldn't.
And that's why I wanted you to come do it.
Yeah.
And I'd been telling you that for years. And I'd been telling other guide buddies of mine that, man, if I could just convince Mo to come pack and just dip his toes in this type of hunting and see what we get to see, he'd love to do it. And I told everybody, I said, he's not going to quit. That's your attitude.
Right.
And I knew you'd make it. And so you did a great job.
Well, and that was part of the reason I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Was because, as you know, and people who know me well, for the most part, know I like a challenge.
Yeah.
And I look forward to, like, wife and kids, and I've made the decision. Military is not the direction I'm going to go with my life. But there was a point I talked a lot about military. And I never talked about, I'm just going to go join the Army, or I'm just going to join the Air Force and just see what they give me. No, I would have a goal in mind. And I always talked about, MARSOC with the Marines, or Navy SEALs, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And I've read a lot of books about those guys and stuff. But I wish there was a way that I could go do buds just to do it.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't mean I was going to become a SEAL. Now, that'd be a great reason to do it.
Right.
But if there was just a way for me to go do it, to go prove to myself that I'm capable of handling what 90% of guys, 95% of guys who go through buds quit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
a challenge.
So being able to go and do something that what's the attrition rate on Packers?
Pretty high.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not 90%,
but it's pretty high.
If to be able to go and do something, sure, having an advantage, but if the attrition rate's 50%, I beat the 50%. It's probably higher than that.
Yeah, and that attrition rate is split between reasons of either quitting because of either home problems, they get in their own head.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's a mental game.
Right? Yeah.
A lot of it's mental. If you tell yourself you can do it, then a lot of times, barring any physical reasons, you can probably do it. And between losing your mind, losing control of your thoughts, or physically, just it being too much for you to be able to overcome in your head again, or just kind of being a problem and getting fired. Because that happens.
Yeah.
But that outfit had a few Packers. It's not like we were very Packer heavy that season. We had some, but you came in to hunt with me and that client.
Right.
That was our group for that hunt. And part of the reason that you were included on that hunt from the beginning and not just assigned to whoever needed a Packer once they killed an animal was knowing the condition, potentially problematic condition of the client, because he had hurt himself that summer. And he had said to the outfitter, he said, I'm going to come do it because I want to do it, but I could have some physical limitations, which would entail you and I splitting up some of his gear and helping him carry his stuff so that he can continue to hunt and lightening that load. And then also carrying a ram or a caribou or a grizzly bear.
Right.
And you and I packing that thing out. In this case, you packing out a caribou so that I can continue to sheep hunt.
Right. And then he's not hurting himself further trying to get that caribou out.
Exactly.
And potentially ruining the rest of his hunt because he then hurts too much.
Right. The guiding industry is a service industry.
Yep.
You are there for the success of the client and the outfitter. You're there representing an outfitter, and you're there to aid in a client having a good experience, a safe experience. Number one, safety is always the top of the priority list. And then secondly, having a successful hunt. And although this hunt didn't go the way that I wanted it to, and I'm sure that he wanted it to, obviously, didn't kill a ram. And there's no putting lipstick on that situation. And it still stings. Not killing a ram is tough. And that's on me as a guide. And that's not an easy thing to say. But that's the reality of it. You don't always shoot what you're after. And when that happens, you learn from it. What could I have done differently?
Right.
Should I have done anything differently? Was it just bad luck? We ran into a few other hunters throughout the experience. And that made some decisions for us.
Right. And it contributed to.
And it certainly contributed to us being in some of the situations that we were and not getting on some of those sheep. Because again, you don't want to be inconsiderate, and just because I'm there as a guide and I see someone else there that's a DIY resident hunter doesn't mean that I'm just going to bulldoze in there and say, well, we're going to hunt these sheep too. They were there first. That's their sheep. If I'm on a ram, I want them to do the same thing. And so do unto others. And so, but having some of those situations arise and talking to some of those people and saying, all right, well, we're not going to bother these guys. And that really changed the scope of the second half of the hunt, was bumping into some situations like that, whether it was other hunters or just the sheep weren't there,
Right.
or they were there and they weren't legal rams, and so we had to move on, or they were squeakers and didn't want to shoot them and had to move on. That's just how sheep hunting goes sometimes. And so for the sake of not just filling up a day-by-day rest of the episode with really information that is valuable to you and I and the client,
Right.
we don't have to go over all that. We hunted hard. After about 12 days, you ended up flying out and going home. You had to go home, get back to work. And then I continued to hunt with that same client. We had a great time. And then he and I went into some different areas. Beautiful, beautiful country. You really would have loved to see that. And I've showed you the pictures. I was thinking from camp, because we hiked way up on this one spot and camped for a couple of nights. And I told the client, I said, when I show Mariah these pictures, he's going to be wishing that he had been able to stay a little bit longer, because it was just different than where we've been.
Yeah.
But again, it was all a valuable experience, and I continue to learn things and try to get better. And the client had a great experience. And when he left, he said this was the best experience that he's had from a guided hunt.
Yeah. He told me the same thing.
He had a great time. He loved hanging out. And that's another part of it too, is keeping the morale high, joking around. And, when you get an airdrop of food and you're eating canned chicken with a plastic spoon on the side of a mountain and talking about how good the protein tastes. And then
passing it back and forth. And
yeah,
around.
Here, have a scoop of chicken,
it's funny.
It's those tiny little things.
You look forward to the peak refuel in the mountain house on the first few days. Like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. But after day 7, 8, you start going, I
kind of want something fresh.
Just a different flavor meal, Yeah.
Or for me, man, I kind of want something sweet.
Yeah.
Something that just has a different flavor that I haven't had in a week and a half. And you start jonesing certain things. Mine is jalapeno chips, cream cheese, cheddar bagels. Yeah.
Yeah, you looked at me one day and the client chips. You said, "You know what? If I could get to that cave, you know what I'd find in there?
Some cream cheese
on a jalapeno bagel,
jalapeno cheddar bagel."
Yeah.
But we got that airdrop, and what did we make with that? It was because the outfitter dropped in the food bag. It was tortillas,
peanut butter,
canned chicken, peanut butter,
pre-cooked bacon.
Yes, Costco bacon.
Yeah, and then we had those that pre-cooked sirloin steak.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
Yep. Vac sealed,
and that you could just pull out and eat that.
Yeah.
Well, and so we had gotten somebody's leftover food too, combined with things we had asked for. They just dropped everything, right?
Yeah.
And so we got a whole, we asked for very specific, exactly what we needed to
try not to go over on weight.
Yeah, right. And then we just got this dump.
The outfitter comes over. Merry Christmas! Several food bags, which we promptly ate probably 2 bags of food that night.
We just started tearing into bags, and I was like, chicken.
Oh, this one broke open from the fall. Let's just start eating it.
And we just started passing it around and eating it. You want some of this? Yeah. Oh, this looks good. Yeah. And then we were like, and then after a few moments, okay, let's calm down and make this last.
Ration this out a little bit.
But peanut butter, pre-cooked bacon on a tortilla is really good.
I put peanut butter, cream cheese.
That's right. You added the cream cheese.
Bacon. I thought there was something else that I added in there.
I didn't think there was.
Maybe not. But peanut butter bacon tortilla is the gist of it.
That was good.
It's pretty good.
Now I got home or on my way back to town, and I get to a place where I have phone service, and I call my wife. Like, hey, good to hear your voice again. We talk for a minute and making some small talk and whatever. And I mentioned the peanut butter bacon tortilla, which she's mortified by probably, but and my 7-year-old hears it too. And is laughing, giggling about it or whatever. So I get home the next day, and no sooner do I get home, and my 7-year-old little girl comes up to me, "Daddy, I made you Nutella and bacon on a tortilla." And sure enough, there it is waiting for me. And I was like, at this point, that's not really what I want, right?
But you ate it.
Oh, I ate it. After a while, I said, okay, well, give me a moment. I want real food here, that kind of thing. And but then I did eat it, and I tell you, the Nutella, bacon on a tortilla.
Whole other level.
Whole nother level. I haven't done it since. It's kind of save it for the
We'll have
the
to
right
have them in
trip.
deer camp.
Because, on the food thing, not that we're going to
Yeah.
delve into this, but
Yeah.
I've done some research on that.
Mhm.
That pre-cooked bacon from Costco, that Kirkland pre-cooked bacon, it's like, 50 pieces in that package?
Yeah, I think so.
It weighs
Yeah.
about a pound.
Mhm.
Okay. For calorie and protein, it doesn't weigh any more than a Peak Refuel or Mountain House.
Wow.
For the amount of calories and protein you get for weight. Peanut butter is the same way.
Yeah.
That little pound thing of peanut butter
Mhm.
has about the same amount of calories and protein that same amount of weight would have in Mountain House or Peak Refuel. And that's actually a lot more compact.
Yeah.
That's why it seems so heavy.
Right.
But so just,
dense.
you don't have to take it. It seems like you do.
Right.
But you don't have to take just Mountain House
Yeah.
and Peak Refuel and whatever snacks.
Yeah. Pro
right?
bars. Yeah.
And you can really break that up into other more whole foods.
Yeah.
And, I think that was a learning experience for both of us.
Yeah.
When we got that in, because I started wondering, like, what is the weight and calorie on this stuff?
Yeah.
Of course, we went from, almost starving ourselves to less than 2,000 calories a day to gorging on as much as we could possibly eat.
Yeah. And not to go into too many details, but everybody after that night instantly found themselves needing to go find a hole
Yes.
somewhere because fresh food just does that.
Yeah.
Your body starts working like it's supposed to.
Makes things move.
Yeah. You're not hoarding energy anymore
Right.
inside yourself. Well, I think that kind of wraps up August.
Yeah, I think so.
By the end of the month, I came home from that hunt and September kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the next episode, we'll talk about
Okay.
your
September.
first solo sheep
Yeah.
hunt on your own.
Get a little more
because-
gear with that.
Yeah, you can talk about more of your gear with that. And then we'll talk about, I went on a moose hunt in September. I went on a couple of moose hunts in September.
Do we want to talk about this, or should we save it?
I was going to say, let's wait just a minute, but we'll do a little bit of teaser at
Okay.
the end of this one. We have a little show and tell prop. So, kind of in summary for this week, thanks for listening. For all of you that have tuned into this week, if you like the show and you like what we're doing,
Mhm.
and you're looking forward to hear more of it, the best way that you can support us is to whatever platform you're listening to this on, like and subscribe to the channel, and then leave us a good review on, if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, 5-star review, write us a review. A written review goes a long ways in helping us get through the algorithm and put this show in front of more people that have other interests in hunting podcasts. Share it with your friends. Text the link to somebody. A lot of you people, I'm sure, are already aware of us from the past, and you're following along. I've gotten a lot of text recently about this and us going this direction, and we appreciate your support. We really do. Without skipping over things, though, you heard in the introduction, this show is brought to you by Stealthy Hunter.
Mhm.
Ryan Lampers has been a friend of mine for a few years now. He's been a great friend to us, and he has decided to support this podcast and our new company, and as a sponsor of our show. And so we appreciate him coming on board. If you'd like to purchase anything from Stealthy Hunter, he has rifle covers, glassing pads, first aid kits, lightweight trauma kit, gear sacks, and then he has also not backcountry, stealthy nutrition.
Yep.
That's what I'm going for there. And he has all kinds of hunting-focused supplements, stuff to keep you healthy, turmeric supplements, CBD oils, and things like that. If you're into that side of things, I recommend Stealthy Nutrition. And for right now, that's all the announcements that we have to make as far as sponsorships go and partners of who we're working with right now. We're going to be careful about sponsorships. We're not going to work with anybody that we don't believe their products actually work. And in any of the gear talk that we have on this show, I don't ever want to come across as this is the only option that you have. If we were to work with a pack company, that's not the only pack that's going to work. If we were to ever work with a footwear company, that's not the only piece of footwear that's a good solution for you.
Right.
Bullets, cartridges, rifles, optics, it's all the same type of thing. Everybody has their preference. And there will be some people out there that don't want to hear about gear, and that's fine. That's why we're doing this part of the show. is going to be more of like a story and recap of hunts and talking about some projects that we're doing, interviewing guests and talking about some of their stories, which is going to be another fun part of this show, is bringing on some guests. But the intermediary show that will air in between the weeks that this show will come out, when we do produce that part of the show, is going to be a little bit more gear related.
Right.
And so if you have thoughts or suggestions for what you'd like to see highlighted or reviewed on the gear side of this podcast, then you can hit up either Mariah or myself on our Instagram. I know Mo already dropped his handle.
Yeah.
It's Modrenalin.
Yeah.
And mine is _endless_hunter, the endless hunter. Or you can just search our names, Mariah Humphreys or Dalton Gray on Instagram. You can hit us up on Facebook, but you're more likely to get a response on Instagram.
Yeah.
So send us a private message there. Or do we have an email that they should send in a question to, or should we hold off on that?
We have an email. info@thegreatalaskahuntingcompany.com.
info@thegreatalaskahuntingcompany.com.
Yes.
.com.
This
And
is the
you
Great
can-
Alaska Hunting Podcast, brought to you by the Great Alaska Hunting Company.
So you can email us there if you have, again, any questions or suggestions for the show about topics, or just you want to weigh in on something that we said. If we say something that you want to correct, if you want to weigh in on Mariah's bandwidth,
Comments with the
inReach and the satellite bandwidth, and you know more about that. Maybe you work for Garmin and you'd like to weigh in on that.
Yeah, or maybe you want to reach out and you'd like to work with us.
Well, we do like Garmin.
We do like Garmin
It's
a lot.
better than the iPhone satellite messaging. I'll tell you that.
I told you.
That's a topic for another time. But anyway,
I told you so.
you did tell me so, but I had
anyway.
to go. I told you anyway. So if you'd like to reach out to the show, you can reach us on our email or on our social media. On Instagram, there is probably the best way for social media.
So we've, like I said at the beginning, we decided to launch this with video. So if you're listening to us on, say, Spotify or Apple, which are the two most popular platforms by far, I know Spotify has integrated video.
Yeah.
And I'm going to work hard to make sure we're on that. So you should, hopefully you already see that if you're there. I don't know if Apple has that or not.
I don't think Apple does.
I think if they don't, they're working on it. And so if they do, we're going to try to be integrated into those as well. But if we're not there yet and you want to see us talk, don't know why, but hey, if you want to see us talk, here we are. One thing that this is going to bring some stuff to the table is why we're launching this way.
Yep.
If you ever listen to Joe Rogan's show, if you're ever listening to the show and he's talking about a picture, you can usually pull it up and see the picture, right?
Yeah.
Switch
to video.
Switch to video. Just pause what you're doing, switch to video, look and see what he's talking about, put the phone back in your pocket and go back to work. And we're going to be able to do that with this.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, we'll be able to do gear reviews and things. We'll be able to show you and talk about it all.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for listening to this point, folks. We've gone on for a couple hours here talking about what we're doing, what the show is about. Again, please feel free to reach out. We hope you enjoy it. We've got more stories coming, interviews coming, and a lot of topics that we're excited to cover on the show.
Yeah.
And we hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoy making it. And this is all just for fun. We live here. We get to see a lot of neat things. We get to meet a lot of neat people.
Right.
And we want to give you guys some insight into that and bring you along to meet some really great folks and hear some of the things that we get to do and talk about some of the gear and hopefully you enjoy it. So if you like the show, please like and subscribe, leave a good rating and a good review.
Send it to a friend.
Tell your friends about it, text them a link. And I guess this is where it ends. Episode 1.
It's in the books.
In the books. Logged. Recorded. We'll see you in 2 weeks.